All right, so you're thinking about moving to the Pensacola area and you're wondering and asking yourself, I wonder what the pros and cons are of living in Pensacola. Well, first off, let me just go ahead and say that that is a very wise question to be asking yourself, because let's be real, the last thing that you want to do is end up moving to an area that you don't like and then be moving again 12 to 18 months down the road. And so, in my opinion, what you ought to do is you ought to do some research by watching YouTube videos and kind of live vicariously through those videos to see if you could see yourself fitting in or living in that particular city, area, neighborhood, whatever. And if the answer to that question is yes, after watching those videos, then boom, the only thing left to do is take action and make the move. But before you can take that action, you need to have a sense of what living in that area actually is like. And so, all that being said, I hope that this video showcasing what some of the pros and cons are of living here in Pensacola will start to help you develop a sense of whether or not you could see yourself living here in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. But real quick, before we get into the video, let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Robert Wilson. I am a licensed real estate agent here in the Pensacola area, brokered by eXp Realty. And my YouTube channel is all about helping folks who are thinking about moving here to the Pensacola area develop that sixth sense of whether or not they could see themselves living here in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. So if this is your first time to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be able to stay up to date with all of the videos that I post, as well as any news or information about any shifts occurring here in the Pensacola real estate market. As I'm sure you already know, real estate is all about location, location, location. So just because the current real estate market that you're in right now, if you're out of town or something and you guys are experiencing some sort of a shift in that market, doesn't necessarily mean that Pensacola is going to be going through the same thing. But just because you're not experiencing a shift where you currently are doesn't mean that there's not a shift happening here in the Pensacola area. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on here in Pensacola, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you will definitely stay up to date with all of the market trends and updates here in Pensacola. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so pro number one about living here in Pensacola is the fact that you are always just 20 minutes away from being on vacation. Let me ask you real quick, have you ever had the thought, or have you ever asked yourself or said to yourself, wow, I really need a vacation? Only to say to yourself right after that, oh no, I can't go on vacation. That would cost too much money. I don't have time to plan that. I would have to book a hotel, buy plane tickets, blah, 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 blah. Then even if you do have time to plan the vacation, have a little money saved up and yada, yada, you're still, at least 2 weeks away from being able to take any action. So if you've ever been through that process, don't worry, you're just like everyone else. Except for those of us who live here in Pensacola. If we ever want to take a vacation, all we really got to do is just load up the car and head to the beach. All right, so pro number two about living here in Pensacola is going to be the fact that Pensacola is the biggest city here on the Gulf Coast. So I have the map of Pensacola pulled up right now on my computer, and I just want to zoom out and show you what the benefits are for being the biggest city here on the Gulf Coast. So if we just zoom out and kind of take a look at the entire Gulf Coast region as a whole, we're looking at, from the Florida-Alabama state line right here all the way over, in my opinion, to Panama City Beach. I mean, sure, there's other cities and towns on the Gulf Coast, but in my mind, the Gulf Coast is made up of Pensacola, Navarre, Fort Walton, Destin area, and then Panama City Beach. Now, out of those four cities or towns, Pensacola is going to be the biggest one out of those. And the reason that I think that is a pro compared to the other ones is for this reason right here that I'm about to illustrate to you. So let's just kind of look at these areas. So here we have the Navarre area, and you can see that right here, this is going to be the beach, right? And then up here, you can see that these areas, especially the Navarre area, is kind of like a bottleneck. Okay, so imagine yourself living in Navarre during, from spring until late summer. If you live in the Navarre area, there's really only two major roads, right? Like you have Highway 98 and then you have Highway 87. Everything else is just kind of like, neighborhood streets. But during the spring and summer months, Highway 98 and Highway 87, not really Highway 87, but especially Highway 98, it's going to be bumper to bumper traffic with folks trying to get out to the beach. So if you live in Navarre during the spring and summer, like it's just gonna be really hard to get around. And that's gonna be the same thing over here with, you know, the Fort Walton, Mary Esther, and then the Destin area, right? Like if you lived in Destin, like it's, you know, forget about it. Like it's just gonna be super, super slam packed, bottleneck traffic, you know, it's gonna be hard to get around. But if you live over here in the Fort Walton area, it would be a little bit better. As you can see, the kind of the Fort Walton Metro, Mary Esther area is a little bit more spread out, you know, but at the end of the day, like it's still a pretty small area, right? And then over here, continuing on to the Panama City area, you know, there are definitely some, you know, a few more major roads that you can use to get around on, but still it's gonna be pretty slam packed with folks trying to get out to the beach. Now, if we take a look at Pensacola, you can see that Pensacola is a lot more spread out, right? Like this is downtown Pensacola. We have the East Hill area, Ferry Pass, northeast side of town. And then over here we have Beulah, we have the Perdido area. And then up here we have Pace, Milton, Cantonment, right? So like the Pensacola area is way more spread out in my mind than it is over in Navarre, Fort Walton, or Panama City Beach. And this is gonna really come in handy during the spring and summer months. Now, as you can see, we're definitely close to the beach, right? But we're not nearly as close to the beach as the Navarre area, right? Like if you live in Navarre, you're basically a stone's throw away from the beach. But if you live here in Pensacola, you know, you got to get on 3 Mile Bridge, you got to go through Gulf Breeze, then you got to get out there to the beach, right? So there is a little bit of a buffer area between you and all the tourists making their way out to the beach. That's gonna be super beneficial to you in the spring and summer months. So given the fact that Pensacola is one of the largest cities here on the Gulf Coast, you do get to enjoy the buffer that's between you and all the tourists trying to make their way out to the beach during the summer months. Okay, so pro number 3 is gonna be the fact that Pensacola is still definitely on the rise. It's an up and coming city. And I know most cities across America over the past 5 to 6 years really experienced a rapid growth phase. But I think that a lot of those areas that went through that growth phase, they're starting to kind of plateau a little bit. But here in Pensacola, like it hasn't slowed down at all. You can see behind me that there's a development taking place right here. This is in the Navy Point area, you know, and just to name a few projects off the top of my head, I know downtown we have the IHMC research facility, Waverly luxury townhome / apartment development taking place. There's the Hawkshaw condominium development. They just got finished building the Palmilla apartment complex. And then scattered throughout the area, you have, you know, so many D.R. Horton developments taking place, Adams Homes, Adore development, building houses left, right, and center. I get calls from folks all the time wanting to move here to Pensacola from California, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, and really just all over the nation. So while other areas across America might be slowing down or kind of plateauing a little bit, Pensacola, I'm telling you, is, I mean, we're still going straight up. So if you're thinking about moving into an area that is going to keep getting better in the long run, definitely put Pensacola on your list, because I don't see really any end in sight to the growth that we've been experiencing over the past 5 to 6 years. I really see it continuing seriously like 25, 30 years into the future. Okay, so con number 1 about living in Pensacola is that we have crazy weather. Now, Pensacola does have a tropical climate, which means that the temperatures here are gonna get pretty high, but the con really isn't the fact that it gets super duper hot. The con here is the fact that we have a lot of random storms. So we're gonna have little storms, and then we're also gonna have pretty big storms. Now, the big storms are obviously gonna be the hurricanes, but like I mentioned, we have little storms, and these little storms, they can be kind of random. They can just pop up overnight unexpectedly. So quick story, I live on the bottom floor of a condo, and I can't tell you how many times I've woken up the following morning, gone outside, about to head off to work, and then I'm standing out there in the middle of the parking lot, and I'm just kind of looking around going like, wow, what in the world happened last night? And essentially what happened was a tropical storm blew through during the middle of the night that no one was really expecting. I get outside, there's, you know, palm tree branches hanging on the ground, there's garden mulch washed out into the street, And it's just kind of one of those random things that you don't really think about or you don't expect. Now, luckily, like I said, I live on the bottom floor of a condo, so it's not that big of a deal for me, but I would expect that some homeowners, you know, you end up having to clean up after these little random storms, and sometimes they do cause damage. But hey, you know, I guess that's just part of living here on the Gulf Coast, you know, living in a tropical climate. So with the good does come some of the bad. So con number one for this video is the fact that Pensacola has crazy random weather. Okay, so one of the cons that I can think of about living in the city of Pensacola is that honestly, sometimes it can feel like you're living in a town where there's just a revolving door of people in your life. And what I mean by this is Pensacola is a military town, so you have people constantly moving into Pensacola, and you know, they don't stay here forever, right? And then also it's a tourist town, so we have people coming in to town for the weekend and then they leave a week, 2 weeks later. So I've definitely had instances in the past where I've made some friendships only to find out, you know, that they're going to be getting PCS'd or getting restationed 3 to 6 months down the road, and it's like, oh man, like, dang dude, you know, you're a really cool guy, but good luck in life, you know, we'll see each other again maybe, you know. And then also like romantic situations, right? Like you can be out and about, you know, having a good time and bump into someone romantically and like, wow, you know, like this is a really cool person, you know, I could see myself hanging out with them, and maybe, you know, who knows, right? Only to come to find out that, hey, you know, nice to meet you, but I'm moving back to Michigan or wherever. We're not moving back to, but you know, my vacation ends, you know, at the end of this weekend. So anyway, it definitely can feel like a revolving door of people sometimes that you just meet, and hey, you know, you hit it off, and then 2 weeks later or 3 months down the road, they're moving on and you're just stuck here in Pensacola. But hey, no worries, because again, tourists will be coming into town next week. Somebody else will be getting stationed here at NAS Pensacola. So it's just constantly like this cycle. And so you definitely do go through times living here in Pensacola where it can seem like everyone you meet is just here temporarily. All that being said, you do sort of make a deeper connection with locals because of that reason that I just mentioned. You know, the locals seem to stick together here a little bit tighter versus, you know, some just regular other town where there isn't the military involved or there's not a whole lot of tourists coming in. So I guess maybe, you know, the con that Pensacola is made up of a revolving door of people can actually be a pro in a way. All right, so con number three is going to be the fact that there definitely are some areas here in Pensacola that are significantly underdeveloped or just generally neglected. Now that being said, that is kind of a setup for one of the pros that I mentioned earlier in the video, which is the fact that Pensacola is an up and coming town. So these abandoned, vacant buildings, or some of these just green spaces in between buildings and in between houses, do provide some opportunities for developers and entrepreneurs to come in here into the area, develop these spaces, refurbish them, build new homes, build new structures where businesses can exist. So I guess this is another one of those cons about Pensacola that actually turns out to be, you know, sort of a pro.